Is there going live music?
We can make going live music. Like a... Perfect. Hello, welcome to Post Tech Radio. This is our third episode and one I've been extremely excited to have planned since before our first episode. We're going to be talking today about tech unions. I think that for a show that tries to cover the things that this covers, especially taking a more leftist approach to tech, collective bargaining, worker power, worker unions in an industry like tech is just so obscenely important. And I feel so incredibly humbled and lucky to have gotten such wonderful folks in the room today to talk about their experiences and give advice out to the world. We have Clarissa from Kickstarter, Dannel from Kickstarter, Ben from United HCL Workers, Steph, formerly of the Glitch Workers Union, and Kimmy from Alphabet Workers Union. How y'all doing today?
Good.
Wonderful.
How many of you? Perfect. Is that like
I just decided to take a long weekend. So.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
I like to do that too. Now, how many of you folks here like talk to each other, know each other outside of, like, how many of you are meeting for the first time?
Got two new folks.
So, yeah, I guess everyone raised their hands about different people.
Yeah, exactly.
I can only imagine that, like, I don't know, it's such a unique experience, I think, at these points to be involved in something like a tech union that you can't do it without community internally and externally. So,
Yeah. I think we all know each other. Yeah, go ahead, Dannel.
Yeah. I was going to say, someone said, like, the unions are big, but, like, the organized labor area is, like, really small as well. And so what's really funny, obviously, like, Clarissa and I know each other from working at Kickstarter together. I'm familiar of Steph's work just because of, like, I'm a big fan of Glitch and all that stuff that they did. I obviously have heard of AWU and HCL, but even when we talk about things, it's really weird because at the table when we've been bargaining, people bring up like, "Oh, you remember this lawyer?" It's like, "Yeah, I remember this lawyer." It's just like, yeah. So there's few enough people who are experienced in lawyering union contracts that everyone kind of knows each other as well, and so just a network of networks kind of a situation. Yeah. So
that's my experience with other activism and organizing in and out of tech. It's like there are sadly a few people who are really leading certain charges. And if you're leading that charge for the first time, you'll be bumping into folks who've been doing it for a while in other different contexts.
It's kind of nice to have this building up of solidarity as we see this new wave of technical organizing. So, like, for example, I am a relatively inexperienced organizer, and so this is my first time meeting most of you, I think. But that said, the new guard is sort of stepping into this space that's populated with many great people. So I'm looking forward to meeting you all.
Yeah, it struck me that there's only a few months between, I think, like Kickstarter and AWU. Like, a lot of these cropped up within the past few months. I'm curious, like, what is that sea change? Was everyone sort of like push at the same time? Like, how did that? Why do you think it all just sort of happened so closely together? Is that even an accurate assessment? Has this been like going on way longer than I thought?
It's been a wave.
Yeah, it ebbs and flows, I would say. For example, AWU, I will just pronounce it AWU, by the way, but I think it's officially AWU, but I'm weird like that. AWU has been in the works, honestly, for like periods of 10 years or more. As long as Google has been around, all sorts of organizers have tried to have influence in their own ways. But it's only within the last year or so that we've found this specific tool set. And so a lot of times these campaigns, they can't necessarily do their organizing out in public, but then it's like the rain happens and then the mushrooms pop up because over the past year you have spent the all that time watering the boglands and swamps.
And I know
That's a
for
great
the
metaphor.
glitch, yeah, that is. I know for the glitch union, we were just so inspired by everything that Kickstarter was doing. And we started working with Code CWA very early on. And as an organization, the CWA was putting a lot of effort into organizing tech. And we're starting to, I think, see the mushrooms sprout up from that with AWU and with Medium yesterday. So.
Yeah, that was a big one.
Yeah.
It's Clarissa could probably speak more about this, but like there's also something to be said about bulwarking your worker protections in an era of political instability, right? So like there's this very interesting I don't know, catalyst event that happened, which was called Always Punch Nazis. And Clarissa has a podcast that details a lot of the organizing stuff, which is great. And I don't say that just because I'm in it, but but like if you think about it, right, like a lot of these things come up when you see like unfortunately we still are even though even though there's been a change in leadership, like we still are in an era where there's far too many people who are anti-Antifa, right, which is short for FA, which is just which is really unfortunate. But you get those people who all of a sudden think like freedom of speech becomes this very interesting contested topic, and that's why we had a project on Kickstarter called Always Punch Nazis, and a lot of collectivism came from leadership saying that they had to take down the project because it promoted violence against Nazis, and I'm just like, yes, violence against Nazis,
in the name.
and so that was like a catalyst event. But I think about that a lot because I think you get places where like even in like anti-war reactions to the United States had over history, you get things like, oh, like let's shore up labor protections because all of a sudden there's a workforce that needs protections that is coming out of like a greater event that was previous to that, right? So I'm not comparing us to World War whatever, but I'm just saying like they both had Nazis in them.
Yeah, I think like if I were to, yeah, I'm just gonna add to that. Like I think that like goes back to Kimmy's original point that like it's sort of this culmination of this cultural shift and the sort of maturity of tech and big tech. And I think like workers are just all across tech responding to the growth of their platforms and their working conditions. And that's why we're seeing this wave of unions, even though this organizing work has been happening, you know, for the length of the companies, pretty much. Anytime a worker shares a problem or tries to make the workplace better, they're organizing. So it's been happening for a long time.
Right. I mean, yeah, I can speak just to like outside of tech. I know myself and so many other trans folks, you get certain presidents, you start to see certain things on the news, you're like, dang, I better get my name changed. I better get my social security card updated. I'm seeing the flow of that to like, this is, well, you're also seeing like, I don't know, I can only imagine the rank and file ISEs inside once they see leadership doing things like that, like pulling things when maybe they always felt that way, but they didn't have any, like, there was nothing to react to until a certain point. That's got to be a big, like, collective act, like worker, I'm sorry, my brain. That's got to be a big, like, class consciousness moment for folks, right?
Yeah.
It's interesting to me because, like, us trans folks, I'm trans too, like, sit at kind of this intersection between values-based organizing and working conditions, right? And so one of the reasons why there's so many lovely trans people that are doing this sort of organizing for me, I think, is because, like, for us, it's not just about politics. Like, the name change is a workplace condition. And that also complements, like, lately, especially during pandemic times, the workplaces, even of tech workers, has gotten very difficult for everyone, with companies laying off, mass layoffs, or forcing you to work from home or to do odd hours. And so even just considering it from like the very old-fashioned workplace considerations view, there's this sort of like drive to take care of each other in your own little community, which is what the organizing relationship is all about.
Yeah, absolutely. And like this is why folks like me or folks like Kimmy might get involved in stuff like this. But I'm curious for you all, a nod to Clarissa for suggesting this topic, but what brought you all to getting, like, what made it feel urgent to you? Like, why did you wind up in either the leadership position you did, or like why it felt urgent to jump on board as soon as it started? Ben, I haven't heard from you. Do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it was just sort of like luck, like kind of random that I was one of the first people to start organizing at HCL. It just, it became apparent to me that there were so many things that were just unfair about the place, as far as like pay equity, like work schedule flexibility. We don't make a lot of money, compared to the full-time employees at Google. And so, I just called the guy at USW and there we went, yeah. So, I mean, we have a lot of like kind of bread and butter working conditions, things that we're bargaining over, but, we're all obviously supportive of the same sort of like ideals and, like progressive policy things that AWU is pushing for, and I also took the press training. So like I get to do all of these things. So I'm like kind of disproportionately out there. But, I enjoy it and I think it's good as much as like, I can share the success that we've had organizing. If it can help someone else, then, I'm happy to do it.
We're all just stepping up and trying to make something a little bit better.
Yeah.
Steph, how about you?
Yeah, so I think kind of Glitch was an interesting organization because we were all very much lured in by the mission of creating very ethical tech, and we wanted to work with the Nil Dash and just be building, like, be the example of what tech should be and what like the morals should be. So we kind of had this group that was already really politically minded, and we were all just having sort of our like discussion work grief chat on Signal, and it would just be like this, I don't know, like constant negativity, like, oh, this sucks, this sucks, this sucks. And finally someone stepped up and said like, well, are we just going to keep bitching about it, or are we going to like do something, right? And I tend to always be like, yeah, let's go, let's do it, let's do something about this. So from there we just kind of built up our small group. It did kind of, we hit this point where we just really had to do something though, as opposed to just talking about it, because we had a former employee who left and had a very open letter on Twitter that got retweeted a bunch, and it was really like shocking the conditions that she had endured. And we really wanted to make sure that just never happened to anyone ever again. So I think kind of our biggest drive was just making sure that the company actually like held up to the standards that we were tweeting about that we were doing, and like, having a seat at that table to be like, okay, well, you said we have transparent pay, so how about we have some transparent pay? Actually, yeah.
We're not asking you to do anything you haven't already said that you're doing. This shouldn't be a reach.
Exactly. So yeah, and then I have kind of like, I guess in a similar situation to Ben, I've done a lot of the talk, so I guess I'm in front of it a lot more, but it was a big group, but I'm like the one who's free to do talks. So
Clarissa, how about you?
Yeah, I feel like the reason I joined was very much tied up with my like identity as a tech worker. I joined the union effort because I was like, oh, I work on a team at the company that brings in a lot of money for the company. I've been here for a long time. I'm safe. Like, I should join because it would help other people like build power at the company. And like, it was right after I heard all of our colleagues like talking about how they had been treated after Always Punch Nazis. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's horrible. I don't have any issues, but I would like to help other people. So I joined. And then shortly after we announced the union drive, I found out I was making 10% less than my male counterpart, who at the time I managed. And when I told management about this, they just said, oh yeah, it's a bummer. too bad. Like, I know that's frustrating, and never did anything about it. So there was like this shift during the union drive where I was no longer, like I was fighting for my colleagues, but also I was fighting for myself more than I ever thought I would be. So yeah, there was like that real shift. And I feel like a lot of tech workers have that moment where they're like, oh, the system is not fair. Or, you know, oh, my working conditions are not as fair as I thought they were. So yeah, so that's why I got more involved.
Kimmy, how about you? Oh, sorry, Dannel, go ahead.
I was gonna say, like, I guess I could just piggyback off that. I think it was really interesting for me because I came, I think, kind of halfway through the process, and so that was part of the. I literally joined the week that the former CEO stepped down and that the union announced their intention to organize or to unionize, I guess, right? And so that was like, I just came in there not knowing anything. I think literally the only previous thing I'd read about working conditions at Kickstarter was a famous BuzzFeed article about goats in the office, and so
those fringe benefits.
Yeah, love them. So when I joined, one of my teammates pulled me aside and was like, "Hey, so there's this thing that's happening, and you should probably know about this." And I was probably the easiest outreach conversation because I had already had experience with just like collective action. I think I've mentioned this to Clarissa, but I grew up outside the United States. I'm a dual citizen with Peru and United States, and in Peru, where I grew up, it was very frequent for there to be farmers' strikes or teachers' strikes or transport workers' strikes, right? And I'm not just talking about like people in one state or one city striking. I'm talking about the whole goddamn country striking all at the same time and just like making everything stop until their demands were met, right? And so going back to there, like my coworker was like, "Hey, so we're organizing a union and stuff is happening really quickly." And I was just like, "Yeah, I'm on, like, whatever, like, let's do it." You know, like I didn't even need to know because to me that signaled a couple things. It signaled that I was finally somewhere that cared enough about each other that they could organize, and that the situation had gotten bad enough that they felt that they needed to wrestle away some of that power from leadership. And so to me, that was just like a very instant, like, I'm on, what can I do? You know, like, and so I got involved very quickly. I think I was at a union meeting literally the next week after I started. And so, yeah, in terms of onboarding, it's been a crash course. But also, like Ben and Steph, I've done a lot of these press things at this point. So I think I'm probably the person who has spoken the most to press from our union.
Same with you, Kimmy, right? You're the press contact.
I am one of many far more well-spoken volunteer spokespeople, I think. But yeah, so for me, I had come to Google in the rosy tinted glasses version of thinking that Google respects the sort of advocacy work that previous amazing organizers had done. And then when they got retaliated out and kicked out, there was this sense of like, now what? And so like late 2019, when we approached CWA, like they came on board and were like, yeah, no, this is absolutely a thing that happens. And here's what you have to do. You know, you have to reach out to people. You have to have one-on-ones. You have to build the movement that way. And so I was kind of pulled on board a long time ago by like a few of my friends who really like invested in me and like trying to teach these skills and teach these skills as if they are something that you can learn and practice. And honestly, one of the big reasons why I'm sort of staying on board is the community aspect, especially this year. Like it's been hard to get together in person. People are feeling lonely and isolated, not just interpersonally, but in their own jobs as well. When you don't see your teammates, when you can't like work together on things. And so one of the most important things to me is to just be a part of a community that's searching for something positive. So that's the selfish reason, in addition to like all of the altruistic reasons of like seeing what people at my company go through, especially speaking to that divide between temp workers and full-timers, which is more artificial than it needs to be, of course. And so it helps make the company better as well, but you also get something out of it. And it's a kind of interesting balance, I guess.
I'm hearing here a microcosm of what I think a lot of people are experiencing in various communities, and what, honestly speaking, for queer folks experience in community forever, which is like the cities and areas which are sometimes less, the least inviting and supportive, are the ones where you have the most vibrant resistance communities, just communities in general, right? You kind of have to stick closer in times of those hardships, and you see that at various different levels. Something came up that I'm curious about, and my privilege here is I don't have to know anything. I have really smart people to explain things to me. I'm curious about, so Kimmy, you brought up CWA, Co-workers of America, I think, and Ben, you mentioned reaching out to United Steelworkers. So I know that, like, so Clarissa, I know that, you know, by virtue of getting there sort of at the time you did, and also just the kinds of people you seem to be, Kickstarter's offered a lot of support and mentorship and inspiration to folks coming up. But it also seems like, I mean, the history of labor organizing goes back really, really far. And I noticed some folks taking approaches of reaching out to people in their local chapters. I'm kind of curious about this, because I think folks who might be thinking about making collective worker stuff happen at their company may not realize that there's perhaps a pretty strong organization in their town that may not be in the exact same industry or doing exactly what they want to do, but they could be reaching out and working with them. Can you explain the relationship between like United Steelworkers and CWA and the union efforts that you both have started? Ben?
Sure. I mean, the organizer who helped us was originally like a friend of a friend, but he said, you know, make sure you do your research, and that this is, you know, that you want us to represent you and to help you out in the organizing. So I did that, did my due diligence. And before I had like talked to him again, someone else from my job actually reached out to the Steelworkers as well. You know, and their international office is in Pittsburgh. So we have a lot of resources like, you know, down the street. So, you know, and then we just started talking to each other at work, really. And it's a totally, like, you know, it's like a bottom-up, worker-led, democratic philosophy to organizing that really appealed to me and a lot of us. So it's worked so far.
And Kimmy, yeah, same with CWA?
Yeah, so like I was not necessarily like part of the decision to go with CWA. That was like decided a long time back. But with CWA, like there were existing ties with the previous company, and like a few of the organizers had reached out to them. At first it was like sort of just very informal talks about like how organizing works. Code CWA runs workshops every weekend, or at least they used to back before they had so many campaigns to juggle, I guess. Every weekend, where you could just send people and get them interested in the mechanics of like how to have one-on-ones, how to talk with people, how to listen and agitate. And so then that was a big start of it. But also like in AWU, you know, the bulk of the work is being done by like Googlers for Googlers, right? Emma Kanema has this wonderful quote during a keynote at XOXO that she gave the other year, where if you have two people in a room sitting together, being empathetic and kind, that's the start of a union, right? Just getting someone else in a room and then talking about like how crappy your work is, yep, or even just being heard, is the fundamental building block that everything builds off of. And so many of these organizations, USW, CWA, are I would say like they provide much of that foundation already. But, you know, if you're listening to this, sitting in a place where you don't necessarily have access to that, like there is a lot of organizing that you can do necessarily outside of those bounds. Although for us, it was a really great framework that worked out in many ways.
That goes right back to what you were saying, Steph. I used to work with a Tech Workers Coalition in San Diego, and I'm still gathering spoons to maybe start similar work in Atlanta, but you know, not a union, but they work with unions. A lot of this like class consciousness building, and we talked a lot about just that central tactic of just collective sharing of grievances. Just getting the first step really is just getting aligned about the fact that this is not your own personal experience, right? Like capitalism tries to isolate and play on that self-doubt and imposter syndrome, and just hearing other people be like, oh no, this is a worker issue. This isn't a me issue. I think that's such a hard step to make to see, harder than it seems like it should be.
Absolutely. So our relationship with CWA kind of, after we decided we wanted to take action, pretty much everyone who was in that smaller group all sort of pinged a different organization to ask their advice of kind of what we were experiencing. And I had met CWA just sort of casually at a party that my friend was throwing, where it was like, meet a union organizer. And I just like got our organizer's info and just sort of had it like in my phone, but didn't really think anything of it. So months later, I was like, wait a minute, I know who I'm going to reach out to. So we talked to all these different organizations, and they all had totally different advice about how to move forward. Like one group told us to do an open letter on Twitter about like our departing employees' grievances, all these things. And then our rep with CWA was like, no, absolutely don't do that. Like you don't have any of the organization done yet. Like you need to get your like ducks in a row before you do any open letters. Like don't start there. So we just really, really loved his advice and felt so comfortable with it that that's how we moved forward with Code CWA. I also got to go and do some trainings about how to do those conversations like Kimmy was talking about, and how to agitate people and figure out what's going on. And it was just, they were an awesome resource. Like I could just text them and be like, oh, this thing happened, and get a response within a couple hours. And they were totally accommodating because CWA is nationwide to all our time zones. Glitch was a half remote company, so we never did any union organizing in person, not one meeting. So it was all just done over Zoom and Hangouts. And we had people in New York, we had people in California willing to talk to us all hours. So I had a really positive experience.
What I'm hearing here is
that
I need to start seeding my dinner parties with positive agent provocateurs, like seeding them with union folks. Like here's your assigned union rep for the evening.
It certainly helps.
Yo, that is good agitation.
That party sounds amazing. I've never heard of a party like that, but yeah.
I want an invite.
What parties
I will
are
be
like.
the agitator.
Steph hit on some stuff I really want to explore. I'm going to give us a 60-second break now, and then now that we've gotten to know each other a little bit and folks have gotten to know you, jump into what can folks learn from you here. But I'll give you a 60-second break now, and just be back in your seat in a minute. Talk to you soon. Kimmy, I really appreciated the dance party you were leading to the break music. Still going, still ongoing.
I don't think anyone but me saw that.
Oh no, I was there dancing with you. One should always dance as if one does not know anyone else is watching. I hear. That's what they say. So Steph, not sure if she's back, but she brought up a very interesting. Hi. Ooh. Robert. Could you mute first? Okay, cool, thanks. Steph brought up something about all right, so we have these larger organizations, whether they're just there in like an advisory agitation capacity, or they're like sponsors and more material supporters like United Steelworkers could be. But the situation of being in like getting various sorts of advice and not knowing where to go, which is, you know, an interesting problem to have. I think a lot of folks don't even realize they can reach out for that kind of advice. But okay, like POV, you're in a tech company, you know things suck, you kind of agree things suck, you don't know if you're ready to take that leap yourself. How do you start to evaluate your options? How do you start to figure out who to reach out to? And how do you decide like whose advice to take if you're getting conflicting advice?
Is this for a specific person?
I mean, just like, you know, thinking of the person who might be watching, who might be in tech, who might be wanting to organize, and needs to know, like, how do you start that process? Whether it's like you're reaching out to someone else or, yeah, just how do you evaluate your options?
Like, if I were at like another company, I would first, I would do a couple things. Firstly, I would find the people who think similarly to me, right? You're not convincing people, you are trying to tap into the people that are already agitated around however your company sucks. And those are the ones that you want to tap into, right? The ones who are firmly like already don't know what to do with their energy, but want to do something. And reaching out to them is by far the most impactful thing that you could spend your time doing. But let's say if you have a group of such people, then it becomes a bit of a science. You are trying experiments and seeing what sort of leverage you can have and seeing what works and what doesn't. For example, if you put out a petition, maybe like, will executives listen? If they're not experienced dealing with employee dissidents, then they might, or maybe they might not. But maybe you now have people that you should go talk to. It could be a structure test. Or do you want to hold a meeting? Or do you want to keep talking to people in the shadows and then build a campaign that way, right? Just like trying a small thing, putting it out there, seeing what it has, and then being scientific about like how to bridge the gap between what happened and what you wished could happen. It's so easy to get burnt out if you do mobilization work and then don't necessarily see a positive response.
Got to know when to do the right thing at the right time, and if it failed, or, you know, quote unquote failed, whether it's because folks aren't ready to do that or you're just not doing the right thing yet to capture that passion. Steph, how did you all decide among all of the contradictory advice you were giving about how to move forward?
I think we just went with what
sorry, so sorry. Okay. You're mega glitchy. Your microphone's mega glitchy. Oh no.
Ironically.
Can you hear me now? Is that okay?
No, I'm so sorry.
Too much glitch.
Maybe you can grab another mic, but maybe I can ask Clarissa, like, you know, I will put in a plug for you for your podcast of like listening to the oral history of the Kickstarter Union for getting some of this on the ground stuff. But if you could recommend resources or a book or anything to like get people started on learning the kind of stuff that Kimmy was talking about, is there anything out there?
Yeah. I think like when I think about the early days of Kickstarter United, we definitely lucked out in having a few experienced community organizers that were just part of the community of Kickstarter workers. So they had done like political activism in the past or community activism. And one thing that was really helpful, I think, is we reached out to other organizations and workers and even people who, like journalists who had covered labor organizing in similar companies. And they all had really great advice and they all had resources and speaking of Tech Workers Coalition, I think you brought that up earlier. Like I have had people reach out to me and say, hey, you know, I'm organizing at X company, and I'd really like to talk to you. And I've already had like 3 conversations with other people at that company that don't know each other. So it's like a really interesting situation where it's sometimes when you go outside of your company, especially in these large companies, you may find people who know other people around you that are ready to organize too. So yeah.
I think there was also a part of like the environment around Kickstarter, right? Like, so Kickstarter has an office based in Greenpoint, and New York is already what people would call like a quote strong union town, although that's like kind of more a thing that people say, I think. But one of the things that's really interesting about that is that Kickstarter, at least New York Tech, is a very small place, right? And so one of the things that's kind of unique is that I was following what Kickstarter was doing a little bit just because I had friends there. I also had friends at Vice, and so I saw Vice organize with the Vice Media Union, right? And so I had friends at a lot of the media outlets. I'm blanking on a number of names. I want to say like Refinery 21 had one union that was happening and stuff like that.
29, I think. Refinery
29, yeah. The number I'll never get, but you see all these places, and then you just kind of ask them for advice, right? And you ask, literally, Vice was maybe like the union next door in some weird ways, where you could be like, hey, I don't mean to copy off of your homework, but who did you organize with, right? Like, and so there's some like really strong things there where you start looking at your options. And I think there was a really interesting crossroads that was before my time, but I heard a lot about it, was where they had narrowed down the options of who to start organizing with down to, I want to say, and correct me if I'm wrong, Clarissa, but I want to say it's WGA East and OPIU. And so awesome. And so there were some very interesting questions around redefining the trade of programming as a writing skill if you went to organizing with WGA East. And so that's kind of not entirely the reason why they went with OPIU, but just one of the many reasons that OPIU was chosen is like, hey, like, we think the Office and Professional Employees International Union is a great organization, and they also provided a lot of resources, right? Like, they were readily available to say, like, we have a local in New York, we're happy to dedicate an organizer to you, and let's get this ball rolling, you know? So
I'm hearing a lot of like, find the union next door, be scrappy with your personal network, don't be afraid to go outside of your network at your company. That goes back to what, Ben, you were saying, right? Like, you found the union next door, regardless of whether they're in your industry. You knew they would be the best place to start.
Yeah, pretty much. And USW was also organizing like at the libraries and at the universities. So it wasn't just like in the 2 mills that are still active out here.
Yeah, and I think most of the unions that we ended up working with all do workshops or public events where they share strategy and basic concepts, and that's a good place to start too, because you're learning and you're getting a feel for which national you might want to work with. So it's a good like 2 birds with 1 stone situation.
So whatever the union is in your town doing events, online or off, they at least would be able to direct you from there. So it is as easy as going on, maybe not Meetup, but like looking up unions in your town and seeing when they meet. Maybe not more than a few minutes of internet research. Steph, really hoping your mic is working, because I really want to get to this burning question of how did you figure out which path to take given so many paths?
Okay, can you hear me? Sound good?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. I still got the worst panelist award, but I'm happy I can answer this. So basically, we just compared all the advice on the organizing committee, and we went with what made us feel the most comfortable. If it was something we felt dicey about, there was no way we were going to sell it to the rest of the group that we were trying to organize with. So we just felt so good about what CWA was talking about. We felt good with their experience that we just felt comfortable and moved forward with it. And just sort of set aside the advice that we were like, oh, I don't want to be the one who does that. I don't want to put my name on that.
So leveraging your collective intuition, you as a body mind collectively is like, I don't know about that. Trust that, Yeah,
exactly. And vote on it.
Yeah. Ben, Ben, I'm curious, for a lot of these folks have been talking about full-time, they're in full-time employee positions. What did you find was different about working with contractors and coming from a contractor perspective? Is there anything there that, contractors being an even more disenfranchised group than employees who might already be disenfranchised at a company? What was unique from that, from your perspective?
I mean, there's a little more precarity, so some people are a little more worried, about losing their jobs. Technically, we're full-time employees of HCL who work at Google. So that's really what allowed us to get a contract or pursue a contract. We haven't gotten it yet. Due
Fingers
to
crossed there.
Yeah, we're working hard. So it was a really unique set of circumstances that allowed us to pursue an NLRB election. But still, it's there's still the relationship between Google and HCL that we had to worry about. That a lot of folks were nervous, in the run up to the election, that management tried to really exploit. And something that helped us a lot with that was the full-time employees supporting us so much and pressuring Google into leaving us alone. So that was nice.
Tech Workers Coalition hammers a lot on that too, is you may not think, and this is why it's so bizarre to me, maybe not surprising at all, that on Twitter you see these conversations around unions but they're already getting paid well. It's well, A, okay, so what? B, not all of them. It's really, really important, I think, that even if you don't have any grievances, you still have some obligation, especially as a person who doesn't have grievances or as many that you think, to look around the org and see who else you might be able to organize with and on behalf of. You're going to win. You're going to get something from that, even if you don't think you will. And others certainly will. What do you all wish you had known going into it? What would you do differently in your own paths? I guess those are two separate questions, but just hitting that balance of all right, you did it. It worked as well as it worked. What could have made it work better from your perspective? Whoever wants to jump in.
So my biggest regret is our organizing committee was not particularly diverse. And I feel really, really bad about that. And that's the thing I would want to fix, is trying to go and source more voices. We ended up being primarily white women engineers, and we just couldn't get a lot of other parts of the organization on board. People were very willing to sign anything that came across, but it was hard to get them to, put the risk of joining the committee and working on the organization side.
I think I would have wished that we could have built very quickly kind of this national coalition across campuses better. You had some OCs that were a little bit further along on their chats, and they're growing, and then you had some more fledgling OCs, and it's important to make sure that everyone is feeling heard and on the same page. And I wish that we had done that more intentionally at the beginning.
There's definitely that balance, I think, between getting everyone on board and moving forward with the people you got, and sometimes you wind up on a side about that you feel good with, and sometimes you don't. That makes sense to me. Steph, you played right into my hands, because I really want to speak truth when I see it. And I know there's a lot of, extenuating things here, right? Tech itself is a much less diverse industry than it should be, which is why folks are out here organizing. Those of us who have privilege in the public eye are often the ones who are on things like this, talking about this. But, from my perspective, and I could be wrong, but a lot of us here are white or white passing. And yeah, let's just talk about that.
I think it is so much about privilege that there is a lot less on the line with your career. And I also feel in engineering, you can find a job in a few weeks. There's so many engineering jobs as well. I have nothing to say besides, it is very much privilege.
Well, let's speak as white people, possibly to white people here. What do you think our obligation, what do you wish, not what do you wish you had done differently necessarily, but like what do you think our obligations are as white folks getting into this kind of work to making sure that the table is more diverse while also respecting the fact that the risk levels are different and more might feel on the line for folks who are more marginalized? What does the allyship ladder look like in that regard?
Yeah, part of this one is really interesting because we also, like, we had I think we had one person of color on our organizing committee, if I remember correctly, and it's really difficult because we also, like, part of what you're saying is like there's a diversity issue in the industry at large, right? But I think one of the things that I always find as a responsibility, like as a white passing person, is the very interesting part of like, hey, I can take this risk so that someone else can't, like, doesn't have to. I think that's something that I try to keep in mind, just because like it's unfortunately just gonna be easier. Like if I ever lost my job, it wouldn't be like, I'm fairly well networked and well connected, and I don't need to like reach too far to find a job, but it's an order of magnitude harder for someone who isn't, and so that's why you frequently see a white face. It's not because we don't welcome faces of color for things like this. I think it's because I don't know. To me, I'm just like, first of all, our membership is very small. But second of all, like, who is going to do this? Who has the time to take out of their day and stuff like that? And so, yeah, I think about it constantly. I think that this is one of those things where it's just about, you have to build a very strong organization, and that comes from both the side of the company, because the company kind of determines who's in your organization in some ways, right? But you also have to push the company to be like, hey, like, we need to hire a diverse set of people, you know, like, and I think that they come hand in hand. You can't have a diverse bargaining unit without a diverse company, and you can't have a diverse company without a diverse bargaining unit. So one of the things that we've prioritized a lot is pushing the company to say like, hey, like, when we're doing hiring, like, we need to reach out to more than just our personal networks, right? Like, we need to reach out to places, colleges, like city colleges in New York, for example, are prime for that, where it's just like, oh, like, all of these people have fantastic degrees. They may not come from illustrious schools or anything like that, and illustrious here is in quotes because, like, what is an illustrious school really? But they may not come from like the known schools for tech that many people know. But it doesn't matter, because they still know the craft of software engineering, or they still know the craft of even people who are like, this is an example that I think about a lot, but people who are like paralegals, right? Like, those are excellent trust and safety people in some ways, right? Because you think about, they just know the intricacies of how policies work, you have to recruit past just like the people you know, because you frequently tend to know a lot of the same people that are people you know are similar to you. So it's not just your friends, right?
Clarissa, how did those considerations make their way through your mind when you were getting Kickstarter United spun up?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I was learning from a lot of other organizers that had a lot more experience than I did. Kickstarter United was my first organizing experience ever. So I think one thing to keep in mind, anyone who's out there watching this, is we are, as organizers, trying to challenge a system that will exploit workers in any way it can. And that usually disproportionately affects people who have less privilege than some of the people who are on more visible roles in the union. And I think we actually did have a bit of diversity in our organizing committee. Like, we had trans people, queer people, we had a couple people of color, but the thing that's strange is that, like, those people were dealing with challenges within the company that made it even harder for them to spend that extra energy organizing. And quite a few of those people were forced out of the organizing effort and forced out of the unit, the bargaining unit. So yeah, just like keep in mind that there are these forces that are trying to keep diversity out of your bargaining unit. And
right.
Yeah, anyway, yeah.
I'm hearing like whether you think you did a good enough job or not, probably never, ever doing a good enough job in making sure that your folks leading these efforts represent the people that they should represent. Your first act as an effective bargaining unit should be to switch that pipeline, like flip it to a place where you can immediately start turning that tide. Since that is one of the things that is so important and so hard to control without a bargaining unit. Ben, how about your experience there? I know that Pittsburgh has a pretty fraught relationship with socioeconomic segregation. I know that I could be very wrong, but the HCL group, lots of folks of color in that. Like, how is that process working out at Pittsburgh?
I mean, we did our best to be, representative of the whole workforce in the organizing committee, and we reached out to everyone at work. I mean, personally, I just try to know that like I have blind spots, and I'm, I do my best, and I just know that I'm not going to be perfect, right? But I think we have, we've tried to be aware of it and make sure we're not excluding anybody, and that we're, doing the best we can to listen to everybody's issues, as it relates to that. I don't know if that was a great answer or not.
No, I mean, I think it's, and again, like this is what I get, and this is what we get for being the folks in this room, right? Like there's not much you can say other than we tried, and we'd have to ask someone else to know if we tried enough or hard enough. And these are just the fraught realities that you have to navigate, doing as good a job as you can, and then trying to do a better job as you get power within the organization. Were you going to say something, Kimmy?
I would like to challenge to do a little bit better than that. Like, so
please,
I know that, like, yeah, I'm white. I'm not on any like executive committee or anything, but like, oftentimes us white people have this bad habit of taking up space, right? And then the union becomes this sort of minority rule. And inside many of these situations, like you can sort of focus against that by prioritizing the input of like the Black and brown organizers that are out there doing the work, right? When you figure out who your role models are or who your viewpoints are, like as an interpersonal thing, find who these people are that are doing the 50 to 100 one-on-ones and listen to them, because not only do they have the experience of that, but of what's going on around them, but they also understand how that lack of privilege hits them uniquely. And like, it's kind of sad that AWU is more diverse in terms of race and gender than the company, but you want to build something better. And so white people can do that by stepping back a little bit and giving the reins to those who are doing the work, I guess.
Thank you tremendously. Yeah, I'm not in your individual orgs. I don't know to what extent any of you need to be taken to task, but I think that hearing from someone inside...
I'm speaking to the viewer.
Yeah, thank you. You can always do better, and the people who are leading aren't always the people that the people who have the privilege to step up and lead, or the time or the ability to, does not mean that those are the only people that you should be listening to. There's lots of ways to solicit feedback, and those should be your primary source of input moving forward as internal consultants, as people with the majority of relevant grievances in the org you're trying to improve. Does that sound about right?
Sorry, there was a lot of head nodding, but yes for the podcast.
Yeah, cool. We do need to wrap up here. I want to give each of you a 1 to 2 minutes to plug, to talk about what you got going on, what would you like people to think about, or how they can engage and reach out to you in the future. Want to start with Dannel?
Oh my God, I struggled to hit my mute button for a second. So a thing that I want to plug, and in the vein of talking about more organizing, I think that so something that OPAU has spun up very recently and went public with is something called the Tech Workers Union Local 1010. It's a mouthful, we know, and 1010 is a fun binary thing, so we got that going for us. But at the same time, so the Tech Workers Local Union 1010 is a local for tech workers by tech workers, started with the help of OPIU, which is the union that Kickstarter Union is with. They're dedicating a lot of resources because they see this as an area of investment for them, not just to grow, obviously, like OPIU, but also to grow like the labor movement in tech. So definitely Google that. I'm sure there's a link in the show notes or something, but Tech Workers Union Local 10th, again, like it's a mouthful, but we'll get over that.
Tech Workers 9 in decimal.
Yeah, it works kind of.
Steph.
Oh gosh, I don't have any specific organization to plug, but I just urge you, if you are interested in organizing, reach out to your local union, reach out to a company that has organized and just ask for their personal feedback. Just, depend on the network that's out there and that's around you. Organizing in tech is really, really new, so none of us have experience in it. So we just really got to depend on each other. So just, send that DM.
Slide right in. Kimmy.
Slide right in.
like the benediction that I would say is like make friends and hang on to them, because that's like also important. But if you want to learn, like so many of the actions that our union has taken has been shaped by learning from the successes and importantly the failures of labor learning in the past. So, if you're interested in whether these things can be applicable, maybe attend one of the Code CWA seminars on how to talk to people. Or there's this lovely little book called Secrets of a Successful Organizer that's very short and approachable, that talks about like the sorts of things that you can do in an organizing conversation. But yeah, I don't have anything to plug. I'm not on Twitter. I always regret using it.
I think that's the experience of everyone on Twitter. Secrets of a Successful Organizer. That's a good book recommendation I'm hearing. That's good. Speaking of books, Ben, you got a book coming out. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I'm a novelist. I have a humanities background. I don't, so like being a tech worker is kind of just in name only. I wrote a novel called Clean Time, and it's about prescription drugs and reality television, and it's hilarious. Buy it from your local independent bookstore.
I love funny people with deadpan demeanors. It's maybe my favorite thing. Clarissa.
Yeah, I guess there are a couple things I could offer as resources. So first is the oral history of Kickstarter's Union. And Dannel is also on that. Oh, yeah, that can be awesome. So basically, a couple months ago, I reached out to some people in the union and said, hey, do you want to help me tell this story? And so many people said yes. And we have about a third of the bargaining unit on record sort of talking about what happened and in great detail. So that's really useful. You could find that at ksru.link. And then another resource that I think might be useful to people is the Collective Action in Tech site. So that's an archive of all of the collective actions that have happened in tech so far. And it can be really inspiring to like look through that archive and see what other people have done and how other people are building power and steal as much as you can. So
sounds like maybe a beginning of a Rolodex of people to reach out to, perhaps.
Exactly. Yeah, there are quite a few. All of the archive events link to press, and in that press, there are usually comments by workers. So yeah, it's a great resource. And then I think lastly, I'll leave a resource of community. So the Tech Workers Coalition, I've been helping out with lately, and I personally found it to be a huge source of solidarity whenever Kickstarter fired me for organizing. So if you want to reach out and talk to people who have had similar experiences or learn from fellow workers, Tech Workers Coalition is a good place to go.
Fantastic. Thank you. And, I couldn't do this without the support of Not Safe Media. You can find them on patreon.com/notsafe, YouTube Not Safe Media, Twitter NSFW or NSF Wonks. They're a fantastic org full of really cool leftist shitposty content creators. They give opportunities like this. Some of them, the shows are on hiatus right now, but if you scroll back to the break, you'll see other shows on the network that are available for consumption. You can tell now that I used to be an orientation leader in college because of what I'm about to do. But Kimmy, would you like to tell us about the ways that AWU used to or ends your meetings, and see if we feel like doing that here?
Yes. So at the end of many such AWU meetings, there is a time-tested tradition of the folks who feel comfortable with it giving a hearty solidarity howl after a countdown. And so, with everyone else feeling free to take off the headphones or whatever, on 3, maybe those who feel called to can do a soft howl. So on 3, 1, 2, 3.
My cat's freaking out.
Thank you. That was great for my soul and probably much less good for everyone else's hearing, but thank you. You all have been freaking tremendous. Thank you so much for giving me your time and effort and showing the hell up. If you're listening to this, you're now obligated to go start a union. I don't care if you work in tech, just start one anyway.
It's a curse.
It is. I mean, any organizing is, right?
You've hexed your listeners.
It gives you just enough good feeling to fool yourself into thinking it'd be fun to do again.
Yeah, just go to yourselves let's just listen to a podcast. Maybe I should start a podcast, and then cross out podcast, and then be like,
my God,
maybe I should start a union.
Oh my God.
Well, thanks you all for being here. I'll keep in touch with all of you, and I'll send out a survey and see if any of you want to come back and talk about other stuff in the future. Have a good rest of your day. Have a good rest of your weekend. Dannel, you already started that, but to the rest of you, farewell. Take care. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Thank
Thanks so
you.
much.
See ya.